It has become obvious that there's a global vaccination agenda that is presently being carried out against all of us in the United States, Europe, Africa, South America, and the rest of the world. Under this agenda, all children and adults are required to have vaccines or will be required to have vaccines in order to participate in such activities as school, employment, to travel, to receive certain benefits, and pretty much anything that the government decides they want to regulate. Today, we're going to be talking about a strategy that we believe will help you fight against this imposition of mandatory vaccines against you and your family. Hello, and thank you for joining me. My name is Ricardo Beas, and today I'm going to give you instructions for submitting your own vaccine religious freedom class action complaint. It's going to be filed with certain federal agencies, and this is to stop any mandatory vaccination requirements that are being used against you or your children in order to go to school or to work or to participate in certain government programs. Even though this applies to many sorts of mandatory vaccine challenges, today's example is going to be focused on California's SB 277, which is legislation that requires children to have certain vaccines or a medical exemption in order to go to school. The complaint is going to be filed with the federal agencies that include the Department of Health and Human Services, the Department of Education, and the Department of Justice. The complaint is going to be filed against school district superintendents in the case of public schools, and if you're in a private school, against that school. It's also going to be submitted against Senator Pan, who was the senator that moved this legislation to have it passed, and to or against Governor Brown for signing such legislation. Now, there's going to be three simple steps, which include correspondence between you and the schools, then you filing the complaint, and then a third step, if you're in California, to submit a additional email or correspondence to Governor Brown. We developed this strategy based on the new Department of Health and Human Services complaint procedure for moral conscience and religious rights violation. Recently, this agency created a new department called the Conscious and Religious Freedom Division. And what this division is supposed to do is to protect your conscience and religious rights. Now, the director of civil rights for HHS, Roger Severino, made the announcement on January 2018. And when they did so with a panel of different individuals, including other government representatives, they talked about abortion rights. That is to say, the right of a doctor or a nurse not to participate in abortion procedures. But our position is that this same agency and division can help us fight any forced vaccination programs that are being used against us in order to go to school or whatever the case may be. In their own notice in the Federal Register pertaining to the new rulemaking, they noted the following: the freedoms of conscience and of religious exercise are foundational rights protected by the First Amendment to the U.S. Constitution and by federal statutes. These laws ensure that, as a general matter, the federal government or any entity receiving any benefits therefrom may not discriminate against its citizens for the views they hold. The intent of this new enforcement effort is to provide conscience-based protections for individuals and entities with objections to certain activities based on religious belief and moral conviction. Obviously, this includes your moral and religious rights not to receive any sort of vaccination against your will and against your religious beliefs. There are many governmental agencies that have civil rights division, just like HHS, that we can take advantage of to fight other mandatory vaccine related programs. Before I get into the specifics of our strategy, I do want to address three questions that people have asked already. The first question is what you're doing a lawsuit? The answer is no. What we're doing is a complaint. So let me explain what the difference is between the lawsuit and the complaint. In a lawsuit is usually when somebody does something to you and you take them to court. You get an attorney, they get their own attorney, you fight it out, and then the court says, you're right, they did damage to you, and they award you some damages. Or they say, no, you're not right, the other party did not do anything wrong, and therefore they don't have to give you anything. In a complaint, is like when you call the police. If somebody's breaking into your home, you call the police and you put a complaint. Hey, there's somebody breaking into my home. So they're supposed to come in and investigate and do whatever it needs to stop that guy from doing that. Well, what we've done is we've created a complaint with several government agencies, in this case, the Department of Health and Human Services, the Department of Education, and the Department of Justice, all of which have civil rights divisions. And what we're doing is we're submitting a complaint saying, listen, somebody is violating my religious rights or my civil rights by making me or forcing me to give vaccines to my children or for me in order to go to school or to go to work. So that is the difference. We're doing a complaint, a direct complaint. We're not going to be involving any courts or anything like that. We're just going, in a sense, to these policing agencies and asking them to take action against these parties that are affecting our rights. The other question is, why do we call it a vaccine class action complaint? Well, the term class action is typically used when it comes to lawsuits. For example, you take a medication, the medication does something to you, you file a lawsuit against them, and then you turn it into a class action lawsuit in which you invite other people that also took the medication that were also harmed by that medication to join you in the action, so everything will be heard in one court. Well, in our case, we have not just me, but many people that are being affected by these different legislations that are coming out. In particular, in my case, SB 277 in California that requires vaccination or a medical exemption in order for my children to go to school. So what I did is I filed a complaint with these agencies, and I'm asking you to join me in my complaint. Therefore, it's a class action complaint. In a sense, we're a class of individuals. We can call ourselves anti-mandatory vaccine advocates. We are a class of people that are being discriminated against and are being denied schooling because of our religious beliefs and conscious beliefs not to use any vaccines on our children. So that's why I'm calling it a class action complaint. So in the example that I told you about me calling the police, it's like you calling the police as well and say, hey, listen, they're breaking into Ricardo's home and also into my home and also into my neighbor's home. So we're all together filing a complaint with the same idea to stop this illegality, this violation of conscious and religious and moral beliefs that is being done against us. The last question is where people have asked me, can we win with your complaint? That's a difficult one to answer. There have been 4 lawsuits already, both in federal and state courts, trying to defeat SB 277, and they all came in with the idea that they were going to win, and none of them have. They have all been denied. Some of them are appealing, some of them just dropped it. So, do I think that we're going to win? I think we have a chance, and we're taking advantage of a new organization that was created within HHS to take this class action complaint to this next level. So let's get into that now. So let's begin talking about what we're going to be doing. What we're going to do is we're going to file a complaint with 3 federal agencies, as I mentioned, HHS, the Department of Education, and the Department of Justice. Each one of these departments has its own civil rights division. For HHS, you have the Conscience and Religious Freedom Division. For the Department of Education, you have the Civil Rights Office. And for the Department of Justice, they have Civil Rights Division. In the case of SB 277, these are the 3 agencies we're going to use. If you were to do a complaint pertaining to employment, you might be going to the Department of Equal Opportunity Employment. So it all depends on what your complaint is. And what we're doing, of course, is we're inviting you to join in our complaint, taking in consideration that the more of us that complain about something, the bigger chances we have of being successful. So while it's great that you follow us as to what we're doing, it would be even better if you join us if you have something that's affecting you directly. We will provide you all the paperwork, all the email text that you need, all the guidance that you need, both in written guidance as well as this presentation. And you can also contact us by email or through our Facebook groups in order to ask questions where we can help you more directly. We will do all the follow-up with all the governmental agencies. Remember, if I win in my complaint pertaining to SB 277, then you're going to win in your complaint. So we're going to be doing all the follow-up with the agencies. We'll do all the phone calls, making sure that things are following the procedure that they're supposed to. If anything is denied, we will appeal it where possible. The only thing you will need to do is to make sure that you get the response to verify that these agencies actually got your complaint. So I'll give you an example. I submitted my complaint to the Department of Education, and again, you're going to submit to all three departments. I submitted to the Department of Education and I gave them several days, and then I called and say, can you give me my tracking number? Because they had not responded and provided one. And they said, Mr. Vaz, we don't have a record of you submitting a complaint. So I got that person's email address. I sent her the complaint directly, and then they said, we got it. They gave it to the right person, and then I got an email saying, here's your tracking number. So it is important that you verify that all your complaints are received, and we will provide you all the phone numbers and email addresses that you need in order to make those phone calls. But once you get that information, it's pretty much just a matter of you just sitting back, don't do anything, and then just follow us through our Facebook group. And you'll have all that information for our contact at the end of this page. But our Facebook group called Vaccine Class Action Complaint is where I'm going to be writing down everything that happens, all the responses that I get, all the emails that I send, all the phone calls and everything. So you'll be up to date as to everything that's going about as far as our complaint. Now, remember the template that we provided and the instructions are pretty much geared for SB 277, but it can cover pretty much any sort of vaccine program or mandatory vaccine program that may affect you in any sort of way. It's just going to be a matter of you modifying that as may be necessary. So once you do file your complaint, again, just follow us on our Facebook group so you can see what's going on. And once in a while, there's a chance that we might ask you to take some action. And it will say something like call to action on that message that I will send out. And there I'll tell you, you need to file this, you need to make this phone call. We won, we lost, we're appealing, and you need to file this document, whatever it may be. So please make sure that you follow all those messages that are going to be sent to you and then take the proper action so you can proceed with your complaint just as we are doing. And of course, whenever you get any responses, let us know. Both uh, them saying, yes, we got your complaint and we got the tracking number for you, or if they say, yes, we're investigating it, or no, we're not, we're going to drop it, whatever it is, just let us know so we can be comparing what everybody is getting as far as a response. While the template that we have created is focused on SB 277, as I mentioned earlier, it can also be used for any sort of mandatory vaccine challenges. Most of the text will apply, probably 80 to 90% of it, if not more, will apply with minimal changes that you will have to do based on your particular situation. For example, if you're going to college and university, there are some of these institutions that are now requiring mandatory vaccines. Physicians and nurses that are being harassed because of their uh, beliefs pertaining to the dangers of vaccines, and in particular, doctors who are being harassed for issuing medical exemptions. Also, for employment in hospitals, some of them are requiring the flu vaccine every year and some other vaccines. And other places of employment seem to be moving in that direction, even though they have nothing to do with healthcare. Also, military personnel are supposed to have certain types of vaccines. If not, they cannot either join the military, stay in the military, and in some cases, I think they can even be court-martialed for not having certain vaccines. Civil servants are now being asked to have vaccines, veterans as well, and most recipients of government benefits now are also going to be asked, if they haven't been asked already, to vaccinate themselves and their children in order to continue receiving those benefits. Also, the right to travel became an issue not that long ago. CDC was trying to get authorization for them to stop anybody in certain circumstances, and if they did not have all their vaccines, uh, that they would be detained until they did, and in some cases, maybe even forcibly being given the vaccines. And immigrants also fall in this category, whereas if you want to immigrate into this country, you are required to have certain vaccines before you can. So let's talk about this new division with HHS. This is the Conscience and Religious Freedom Division, and they're supposed to protect our conscience and religious freedom rights. Now, they make it appear as to conscience and religious freedoms being two things. When you go to the conscience, sort of definition that they have on their page, it talks about conscience having to do with religious beliefs and moral convictions. So, moral convictions may not be necessarily associated with religion, maybe simply your moral beliefs based on, let's say, the Ten Commandments without necessarily believing in God, that you're not supposed to do damage to your neighbor, that you're not supposed to steal, you're not supposed to murder. So those would be your moral convictions. In the case of a doctor, if a pediatrician knows that some of his patients are getting injured by vaccines, his moral convictions could be not to give vaccines because they're wrong. It's morally incorrect for him to give these vaccines. And if he's a religious person that believes that God requires him to not do harm to others, then his religious beliefs would be not to give vaccines and to issue a medical exemption so that person would not get any vaccines. Now, when you go to the HHS notice that they have, it says both morals and sound policy require that the state should not violate the conscience of the individual. All our history gives confirmation to the view that liberty and conscience has a moral and social value which makes it worthy of preservation at the hands of the state. So deep in its significance and vital, indeed, is it to the integrity of man's moral and spiritual nature that nothing short of the self preservation of the state should warrant its violation, and it may well be questioned whether the state which preserves its life by a settled policy of violation of the conscience of the individual will not in fact ultimately lose it by the process. This is from a Supreme Court case, so this gives a lot of strength to our argument that they cannot force us to take vaccines. Now, do you have a religious belief or do you believe in God, and is that necessary to file a religious freedom complaint? Well, when we talk about religion, for the most part, we are talking about God, a belief in some sort of a God. So, from that respect, the answer is no. If you do not have a religion and you do not believe in God, you cannot claim a religious freedom complaint. Although it can be said that you can file a conscience complaint, conscience beliefs complaint, based on what I mentioned earlier. Can a person of non-Christian religion file a complaint? Yes, because there are many religions that believe in God and believe that God orders them to take care of themselves and their children, so it would apply as well. Now, it is my belief that there are three types of individuals out there when it comes to believing in God or not believing in God. One of these are people that have faith in God or the afterlife or a spiritual life. These are people that have been taught about religion, have been going to church since they were kids, that their parents talk about religion and God, and they believe it just simply based on everything that they've heard. They never experienced it, but they believe it. The other type of people or persons are those that have had the experience. These are people, for example, that died and were declared dead for seconds or minutes, and next thing you know, they come back to life talking about their encounter with this eh, being beyond what they have comprehended. What many of them calling it God, some calling it Jesus, or somebody simply saying that it was a spiritual awakening that they had and that they were sent back to Earth to continue their mission. And the third type of people are those that are atheists. Atheists are people that don't believe in God. Now, for the most part, my personal belief is that atheists are people that may have had some religious background that came from their family or their descendants, but they never really put much attention to the religious aspect of life or God, and they've never had any sort of an experience that make them believe in God. And that's understandable. I mean, especially in this material world that we live in right now. But that makes me wonder, can an atheist use their religious freedom right to fight these mandatory vaccines? Well, as I said before, when we talk about religion, religious, or God, it has to do with a belief of some sort of God, and therefore an atheist would not be able to use the religious freedom right, although they can use maybe the conscience right. But I want you to think for a second, if you are or consider yourself to be an atheist, are you really 100% an atheist? Is it also just a matter of what you have experienced in life? For example, if you and I were to go to the Empire State Building and I accidentally push you off the edge, as you're falling those 10, 20 seconds before you hit the floor, you're probably going to be praying to God that He save you or that He wake you up from that nightmare. And if you just bought a boat and took your family out fishing and you're 3 hours away from shore, and if next thing you know it's becoming dark and you start driving back to shore and your boat catches fire, you're probably going to be praying to God that He put it out and that He save you and your family from dying. And if you have a baby in your arms that just got a vaccine and it started convulsions and is becoming lifeless, you're going to be most likely praying to God that they save that child. And the reason I believe that is because I believe that we all have this little spark inside of us, some of us bigger, some of it smaller, based on our experiences, that we do believe in some sort of an afterlife and that maybe we're waiting for that manifestation to happen so we can believe it. So if you have not made a decision of whether you believe in God or not, I want you to think about what I just said and also think about this. Personally, I have had experiences that have proven to me that there is life after death, that there is spirituality, that there is a God, however you want to define that God, but there is this power larger than us, that we are a drop in this ocean that we can call God, and that it is here to help us. And if you believe in everything that I just said, then maybe you're not an atheist as you thought. And if that is the case, you should use this religious freedom complaint in order to help you stop this mandatory vaccination that's happening against you or your children. The next thing that we need to determine is who are we going to file against. So in the case of SB 277, we're going to be filing with the school, whether it's the school district if you're in a public school or to the actual school if you're in a private school, to the administration and the superintendent. We're also going to be filing against Senator Pan, Richard Pan, who is the one that promoted SB 277, and we're also going to be filing against Governor Brown, who signed that legislation and supposedly made it law. Now, there are presently 3 states that don't have any religious exemption: California, Mississippi, and West Virginia. But that list is going to be increasing most likely if we don't put a stop to this mandatory vaccine agenda that's happening. In your particular case, if you have something else that you're going to be filing against, not necessarily SB 277, but whether for one of the other states regarding schooling, as well as going to universities, going to certain types of jobs, etc., then you have to determine exactly which are those discriminating parties in your particular case. And then you also have to determine which governmental agencies you're going to be asking to investigate this and take action in your favor. On the left side of the screen is a copy of the first page of your complaint. As you can see, it'll have your name, the name of the agencies you're filing with, and the name of the persons that you're filing against, including the title of your complaint. It's going to say Vaccine Religious Freedom Class Action Complaint, and then you're going to get into the specifics. In my case, my child's conscience and religious freedom right to attend school without mandatory vaccination. And on the right-hand side, you can see an example of the first page of our instructions that will tell you exactly how to do all your filings. So now let's get into the specifics of the complaint process. We're not going to be filing with the agencies directly. We're going to start first with the schools, give them an opportunity to do the right thing, but more than anything, because we're almost sure they won't, so they can provide us documentation that's going to prove our case. and we're going to ask you to contact them by emails. Now, for this example, we'll assume that we're going to a public school. So I want you to send emails, and emails because that's faster communication, and also so you'll have written proof of all the communication that happened between the two parties. And we're going to provide you all the templates that you will need. And the first email is going to be to the administration, somebody below the school superintendent, maybe the administration office, admissions office, nurse's office, records office, whatever it may be. You need to go to their website, look at all their information, see all the contacts, get those email addresses, and then you would send your email. And you're going to be asking a simple question without mentioning anything about your rights or violations or the dangers of vaccines. Simple question: hey, my child by next year is not going to have all the vaccines that you are requiring to have, and we don't have a medical exemption. Are you going to allow him? And almost immediately you're going to get a reply saying, no, we're sorry, but we can't allow him. And at that point, you're going to send your second email, and that's going to go to the school superintendent. That's where you're going to tell them that your child has a right to go to school, and that the people in the administration have already replied to you saying they will not accept him without the vaccination or the medical exemption, and that that's going to be a violation of your conscience and religious freedom rights. And you're going to explain why, and you're also going to provide an exemption letter that we will provide you, and that one will tell them specifically what your rights are. It will say what your religious beliefs are and how they're being violated. It's going to say what laws they're violating if they do not allow your child to go to school. And it will also say that they will lose all immunity if they violate their oath of office and violate the Constitution by violating your constitutional rights to go to school. That will definitely give them something to think about. Now, at the same time you do that, you're going to send a Freedom of Information request. In California, that would be a Public Records Act request, or PRA, asking for all documentation or receipts of federal funding pertaining to money that they got from HHS, Department of Education, or whichever other agencies. And I've already gone through this process, and they're getting thousands and thousands, in the tens or hundreds of thousands, from these agencies, and that creates jurisdiction for these agencies to regulate them. When they accept federal money, they have to accept certain federal laws, and some of them may be a violation of our civil rights, which is what we're doing through the complaint. Now, if the school district refuses to accept your child, then you're going to be filing your complaint with the three agencies, or the agencies that may apply. And there's a small chance, of course, that the school may reply, say, we will accept your child regardless of the vaccines and the medical exemption. We don't expect that to happen, but the threat is there to them, so who knows how they may act. So again, most likely they will not. So you will be filing your complaints. We will give you instructions exactly how to do that. And we do ask you to join our Facebook group, Vaccine Class Action Complaint, where we're going to be giving you updates of everything that's going on as far as the complaint. Now, I have already submitted my emails to the school district. I'm already talking with the superintendent. They told me that they needed time to reply to tell me if they will or will not accept my child. And regardless of that, I have already submitted my complaint because I'm anticipating they will not. I don't want to lose any time. It's already getting close to the uh, period in which you have to register your child with school. So I'm waiting for that response from them. And because we already have those papers in, then join our group so you can be up to date as to everything that we're doing, what we're sending, what they're replying, what they said as to whether we need to file additional documents, and we'll tell you if you need to do anything as well. Also, we're going to be asking you in the case of SB 277 to send a fax to Governor Brown asking him to issue a signing statement saying that the religious exemption is still applicable. We have created written instructions for you to follow in order to do this procedure, from the emails that you will be sending to the schools as well as the complaint itself. You will find the link to all those documents when you go to the end of this presentation. Here are some general recommendations. Make sure that you start a file folder for all your records, a copy of your complaint, a copy of all your emails and the responses that you have, the certified receipts, everything. You need to have a printed copy of everything. So every email that you send or that you receive, you need to print it for your records. Remember, some of these are going to be exhibits in your presentation. Also, make sure that you send the complaint to all three agencies, the Department of Health, the Department of Education, and the Department of Justice. Now, for the Department of Education and Department of Justice, you're going to be sending your complaint by email, and we provide that on the complaint itself, and by regular mail. And every time you send something by regular mail, make sure that you send it return receipt and certified receipts. You'll have actual documents with signatures of the people that received it and the date when it was received. In the case of HHS, for that, you're going to be using a special portal that they have, and here's the link to that. So you're not going to be sending it by their regular email address. So you're going to use the portal, and we have instructions on our document that shows you even screenshots of everything as you go through that portal to make sure that you put in the right information. And at the end, once you submit it, you're going to get an email that's going to give you a tracking number or confirmation number. It won't give a title to it. You'll just see a number there. We want you to use that number when you send your mail to HHS, and you're going to write something to the effect of, here's a copy of the complaint that was submitted through the portal, uh, tracking number, whatever it was. So they will know that it's the same document. Also, you're going to find quotes from the Bible, and this is from the 1611 King James Version. Do not change that. It's going to look a little different when you read it. Just leave it the way it is. There's a particular reason why we're using this version of the Bible, and we'll explain that in the future. Also, throughout the document, you'll see things that I highlighted in yellow so that you can go ahead and make the changes and then remove the highlights. But there are three things that I want you to leave highlighted. One of them is in the first page. Your name and address and that information should be highlighted in yellow. Also on the first page as well, the title of your complaint, vaccine class action complaint, and then whatever else you have under that, school issue, employment issue, all that should be highlighted in yellow. And then on the second page of the complaint, where you're going to write your name, leave it in bold, underline, and highlight it in yellow. And the reason for these highlights is because other people are going to be using the same template to submit their complaint. So we want to make sure that it's clear which one is yours by putting special emphasis on that. Also, never write your name in any legal document all in capital letters like you see in this example. Always use only capital letters for the first letter of the name. And that is important because when you use all capital letters, what the courts or the agencies automatically assume is that you're a fictitious entity, that you're some sort of a company or corporation created by the government, and therefore you're under the jurisdiction of the government and they can rule against you or in your favor as they wish. So we want to make it clear that we are not any sort of legal entity. We are individuals. We are persons. Children of God would be the best way to describe ourselves, even better than describing ourselves as human beings. There's an issue sometimes with using that term. So you're children of God, flesh and blood. You're not a corporate entity. So make sure that you never use all capital letters for your name in any part of any document. Okay, now if you're filing for the SB 277 challenge, then everything that's already highlighted in yellow is what you need to change and then remove the highlights except where I mentioned above. And that's pretty much all you need to do for the SB 277. Everything else is pretty much complete for you. And of course, you're going to have specific exhibits that you're going to use in your case that come from your school. For all others, there are going to be changes that need to be done. Most of the document is going to be usable, 80, 90, 95% of it, but you will have to make changes if you're from another state or if you're challenging a company that is going to fire you for not having your vaccines. And make sure that you contact us so you can give you some guidance as to how to do that. And when you submit your complaint by email, make sure that you send a PDF file. So we provide you the Word document, open it, make the changes, save it, print it, then sign it. There's going to be two places where you're going to sign, and then scan it to turn it into a PDF document. And that PDF document should have a name like the one that I show here, something like your name dash vaccine religious freedom complaint dash, and then you can put something else like uh, school challenge, employment challenge, whatever the case may be. So in this case, it would be John Smith dash, etc. Okay, very important. Again, other people are going to be filing complaints. We want to make sure that they can find yours if they need to go to the email that you sent. And for non-SB 277 complaints, of course, you're going to have different agencies that you might be submitting to. So make sure that you find out which ones those are. Make sure you can contact us if you need any help with that. And also determine who you're going to be filing against. Who are the companies or individuals that are violating your rights and discriminating against you. So we have now given you all the different parts of the strategy that you're going to be following in order to file your complaint, from starting to school to submitting the complaint to federal agencies. What you also need to do is to understand the complaint itself. You have to read it carefully. You have to understand what each part means, how it relates to you, and how each part relates to each other so you can understand exactly what you're asking and what you're claiming in the complaint. So I'm going to list here the different sections of the complaint. I'm just going to show them to you on the screen. But what I do want to read to you is what I have in the first part of the complaint. And this is from President Trump's first State of the Union address, where he gave very specific instructions to all the executive agencies under his command. Presidential Declaration and Instructions to Cabinet Secretaries. Protect religious liberties. Faith and family are the center of American life. The motto is In God We Trust. Remove federal employees who undermine the public trust or fail the American people. Now, these two statements are very powerful because the first one is saying you have to do your job and you have to protect people's rights, civil rights, including the conscience, moral, and religious rights. But it's also giving a warning to the employees of the federal government that they shouldn't be there if they're not going to be doing their job, if they're going to be violating their oath of office. And therefore, they have to protect you. They might even lose their immunity and can be sued for not doing their jobs. So here are the different parts of the complaint. So now you have everything that you need in order to try to stop this mandatory vaccine agenda that's being used against you, whether it's for school or for work or whatever it may be. When you go to our webpage, you're going to find all the documents that you need, the complaint itself, the template in Word format and in PDF format. We have the exemption letter, and we also have the instructions for you to follow, including email templates for that email correspondence that you're going to have with the schools as well as some of these agencies. So we have our web address right there that you can access. And if you want assistance specific to what's going on as far as the complaint, including the SB 277 complaint, then just go to our vaccine group, Vaccine Class Action Complaint, at the address that I have listed right here. And for any general assistance that you might need, especially if you're from another state fighting the school mandate or for work or anything like that, make sure that you contact us at the addresses provided here for email so that we can help you put all that together and where necessary so we can create groups of people to work together on these documents. Thank you very much for joining me as I went through this presentation. Let's hope that together we can make a difference and stop this agenda of mandatory vaccines. Have a great one. Bye bye.